We are tracking multiple waves of cold air on approach, along with a potential winter storm system, and we will break down all the details for you. We will also provide an updated outlook for December, as there has been significant discussion surrounding the forecast for that month, particularly its potential to favor conditions for multiple winter storms and significant cold air intrusions. We'll review the latest data we have on that pattern. A very good Thursday morning to you. I hope you're having an excellent day. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking the video if you find it helpful. Also, if there's anything I can keep in my thoughts and prayers for you, please feel free to share it in the comments below, as it's a deeply valued part of our community here. Now, let's dive into this morning's forecast. All right, let's examine that potential winter storm. We'll get straight to the models, beginning with the outlook for next Tuesday, November the 25th. I do anticipate a significant rain event unfolding across a large portion of the central to eastern United States. Initially, there won't be much cold air associated with this system. However, that is expected to change as we progress later into next week. As this transition occurs, moving into Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve, the forecast points toward a rainy day across the Northeast. We are also hoping to see some much-needed precipitation across the Southeast. I realize that may not be welcome news for everyone's holiday plans, but conditions are becoming increasingly dry across parts of the South. For perspective, my own location here in central South Carolina has not recorded measurable rain for the entire month of November, so that rainfall is certainly needed. Now, let's shift our focus to Thanksgiving Day itself. What can we expect? Perhaps some scattered rain across the deep south, but nothing overly significant. However, there is some atmospheric energy to monitor, particularly on the European model, which is currently the most aggressive with this scenario. And please note, this could certainly change on the next model run later this afternoon, but currently it shows a major rainstorm developing for the 28th of November, the day after Thanksgiving. A low-pressure system rapidly intensifies, with additional energy to the north, and these elements combine to generate a winter storm. This is not a definitive forecast, just a single model run. Although the ensemble members do offer some support for this solution, I believe the models are still working to resolve the details for this time frame, as we are looking at a system that is roughly 8 to 9 days out. So there remains considerable uncertainty, but it does depict a rather deep low-pressure system off the coast of the Northeast. Cold air would wrap into the moisture field of this low, producing snow on the backside of the system from the spine of the Southern Appalachians all the way up into Pennsylvania and across the broader Northeast. However, I would caution against focusing on the state-by-state details at this stage. We are still in the early stages of tracking this potential, but the model does develop it into what is essentially a full-blown nor'easter, and it evolves into near blizzard conditions for parts of the Northeast as we head into the 29th and 30th. And as I've said, please do not treat this as a certainty. We are not forecasting a blizzard for the 29th of November in the Northeast at this point. It is just one model run, but the atmospheric energy for such a storm is present. Okay, so after that system potentially moves away, what are the other models showing? Let's examine the latest GFS run. It shows a similar scenario, with a significant rainstorm to start our work week next week. As we approach Thanksgiving Eve, there is an indication of some cold air filtering into the northern sections of New England, though it doesn't appear to be a major factor at this point. However, as we move into the heart of Thanksgiving Eve, a significant rainstorm is possible across the Northeast. It appears on this model that much of this energy ejects out ahead of the cold air, of the northern stream energy, according to the GFS model. Consequently, we're not seeing a significant phasing of moisture and cold air in this particular model run. However, as we advance into the Thanksgiving morning timeframe, we do see a scenario where cold air is chasing the available moisture, and more broadly, for Thanksgiving evening and overnight, from the 26th into the 27th, a substantial amount of moisture is forecast across the eastern U.S., which could impact travel. We know the day before Thanksgiving and the day after are major travel days, and this system could certainly cause disruptions. However, this is a stark contrast to the European model. So, let's examine the time frame where the Euro is indicating a major winter storm, because as we look at the GFS for that same period, there's virtually nothing developing. For instance, if we look at the data for Saturday evening, the 29th, on the GFS, and compare it to the same time on the European model, the discrepancy is massive. The European model depicts a major winter storm, while the GFS shows absolutely nothing besides some ongoing lake effect snow. So there is clearly a major disagreement between the models. Now, turning our attention to the Euro AI model, it shows a similar outcome, depicting a significant rainstorm moving across the region. It indicates a lack of significant cold air, and it's important to note this product only displays moisture and precipitation, not the precipitation type. However, based on the temperature profile, we can confidently say this is primarily rain, though a little bit of snow is possible, as a small pocket of cold air moves in with this cold front. Consequently, we could certainly see some lake effect snows develop. We will refine the details on that as we get closer day by day, but this grayed out green area on the map is indicative of potential lake effect snow. But regarding the specific time frame the European model is highlighting for a winter storm, there is absolutely no signal on these other models. This leaves the European model as a notable outlier, but we know it's a highly reliable model. So, the next logical question is, does the European ensemble support its operational run? And we're looking at this in 48-hour increments. For those of you who have been following the channel since last winter, or the one before, you'll recognize this product, which I find particularly useful. It helps to filter and identify the most consistent snowfall signals rather than looking at a full 240-hour model run all at once. In a long-range run, you'll often see a snow signal appear and then vanish, showing 1/10 of an inch or an inch of snow intermittently. And I do apologize if you hear me sneeze. I'm contending with some rather severe allergies at the moment and can already feel them acting up. Now, as we move into the Thanksgiving holiday and the day immediately following, we can see the signal for lake effect snow emerge. It's nothing substantial yet, but there is a growing signal for some light snow across the Midwest. So, does this signal appear in the same time frame that the operational European model is forecasting? The answer is yes, it does. You can see how a signal for light snow begins to blossom over the Southern Appalachian Mountains, including parts of North Carolina and Tennessee. The amounts are not significant, perhaps up to 1 inch in the highlands of West Virginia, and then as we head into the final day or two of November, the mean snowfall forecast shows a couple of inches possible across the Northeast. So there is a developing signal that certainly lends some credence to the operational run. But we must emphasize that we are still quite far out in the forecast period. We're looking at roughly the day 10 timeframe, so while there is something to monitor here, it's difficult to assign high confidence until we see continued consistency in the models and broader agreement from other forecast guidance. So, what's causing this difference? Why is the European model presenting this particular scenario? Well, it involves this shaded yellow and orange area, which represents energy in the upper levels of the atmosphere. We have energy associated with a trough digging southward, and there is also a separate stream of southern energy present. Now, there is a potential combining factor here, which you can see in this large loop. This is a process we call phasing, where these two energy sources begin to merge. The northern stream and the southern stream energy connect, and this interaction causes a significant deepening of a low-pressure system. That is precisely why the operational run of the European model is forecasting such an impactful winter storm scenario. There has been some model inconsistency regarding this time frame, which is why I wanted to address it in detail today. So, what about the European AI model, which doesn't indicate a significant event during this period? Why the discrepancy? When we analyze the energy in the upper levels of the atmosphere in that model, we find it is predominantly dominated by the northern stream. As a result, there isn't a substantial amount of energy available from the south. While some energy does manage to escape, from the southern regions ahead of the main trough, the crucial cold air has not yet settled into place by that point. Therefore, the ingredients do not come together for a significant winter weather event. I believe, regardless of the storm's intensity, this system is going to deliver a shot of cold air. The dip in the trough itself will ensure we experience colder than average temperatures. We have been closely monitoring the potential for our first significant cold front of the season. We have been pinpointing the arrival of that first major cold front for late next week, moving into the final week of November. Confidence is now growing in this forecast, and it is supported by the 8 to 14-day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, which I will show you right now. You can see these areas shaded in blue and green. This represents anywhere from a few degrees below average to as much as 15 degrees below average. So, for example, if your average high temperature in the south is 60 degrees, you could see a day or two with highs perhaps only in the 40s or low 50s. So, some chilly days are certainly on the way, though not extreme by late November standards. It will, however, be a distinctly chilly winter-like air mass for the fall season, which we are technically still in. I anticipate this colder air will remain with us for some time, and then I do expect a pattern change to occur. As we head toward the 30th of the month, we will still be dealing with slightly below average temperatures, as indicated by the blue shading. These are colder than average temperature anomalies. But notice this green area appearing in the middle of the country. We've been discussing this as well. The potential for an Arctic outbreak exists, though the probability has decreased since yesterday. Still, this represents very cold temperatures, on the order of 15 to 20 degrees below average, descending across the nation's midsection. It's a notable signal for some very cold air to plunge into the central part of the country. However, I do think we will warm back up across the southeast as we head into early December, as a ridge of high pressure begins to build. This forecast could see some adjustments. This warming trend has been a consistent signal in the long-range data for a while, but the forecast does still show a significant plunge of cold air into the middle of the country as we get into the 2nd and 3rd of the month. We will delve deeper into the December forecast later in this presentation, but for now, let's examine a single operational run from the European AI model. It indicates a significant cold front moving through, projected for the evening of the 30th. I recognize this is quite far out in the forecast period, but that is a remarkably sharp gradient for a cold front on that Sunday evening, the 30th, which points to a potent system. We're looking at sub-freezing temperatures in the Texas Panhandle, while simultaneously seeing readings in the 80s down near Brownsville, which, as you know, is a pattern that can occur in Texas a couple of times per year. It's not entirely unprecedented, but it is always a significant shock to the system. Therefore, this is a major Arctic front, and I believe there is a credible possibility of this scenario unfolding, based on our current data, especially with the considerable high-latitude blocking over the Arctic region that could dislodge a large mass of cold air. And importantly, all of this is corroborated by the 8 to 14-day temperature outlook. If you've been following our forecasts, and likely those of others, we have been working to pinpoint the arrival of that first cold front. Now, our focus must shift to identifying the second cold front. I am confident that the first front late next week is essentially locked in. But take a look at this from the experts at the Climate Prediction Center. We have been discussing an eventual pattern change, and this data reflects that. Here it is. This outlook covers the period between the November 27th timeframe and the 3rd of December. So, this forecast extends into the period where a ridge of high pressure is expected to build into the eastern United States, which you can see creates a somewhat offsetting effect. However, if you reside in this blue-shaded area, the guidance is leaning towards below-average temperatures. There is a probability of it. The deeper the blue, the higher the probability of below-average temperatures, which covers a large portion of the country. I am actually not anxious, but rather eager in an anticipatory way to analyze what the new 3 to 4 week outlook indicates tomorrow, which is a topic we are about to address. Consequently, any storm system within that time frame where Arctic air could plunge into the middle of the country, well, the European AI model will only display green for precipitation, but a portion of this will be snow, especially as this Arctic boundary pushes southward. I believe this could evolve into a significant storm system right here, and conditions could become quite dynamic with this event. I also think a great deal of rain could overspread the eastern United States ahead of this boundary, but we still need to resolve the specific details. The standard European model is now showing something similar as we approach the final 2 days of November. It depicts moisture moving along an Arctic boundary right in this area. This could result in some very cold, impactful snow. However, it is certainly not as aggressive with this solution as the European AI model. So, there is a signal once again. Let's look at the 3-day period for snow. That's 72 hours. You will observe a signal disappear and then reappear as we advance through the forecast period. You'll see an area of snow develop across the northern plains. While not unusual, I understand, it is winter after all. It's a notable trend. There is a clear signal for an event as we get into the last couple of days of November and the first couple of days of December, right here across the northern plains. And I want to monitor this situation closely as we get nearer. So, as we transition into December, there is considerable model discussion about this, and we're seeing variability in the extended weekly forecasts, and frankly, that is to be expected, but we begin where we conclude at the end of the regular European ensemble 360 hours out. And as we advance the forecast, right, this is for the 3rd of December, it indicates a significant drop of cold air across the central part of the country. Now, this aligns perfectly with what we were just discussing. Okay, that is consistent with the large trough we're observing. The area depicted in blue represents a trough of low pressure. This feature ushers in colder air and can occasionally trigger a storm system or even multiple systems. We're also seeing a significant ridge building right up into Alaska in this area. This is what will dislodge that cold air, driving it down into this trough. Simultaneously, another ridge is building across the southeast. This will facilitate the return of warmer than average temperatures following the initial cold front next week. However, this pattern is likely to pull down a substantial amount of cold air from the polar region. This is what we refer to as a cross-polar flow. When we observe this extensive blue shading stretching from the high latitude southward, it signifies a direct connection to the true Arctic region. So, as we proceed further into the forecast period, what's the evolution? Does this ridge begin to break down? Now we're looking several days into December. On the 6th, for instance, you can see the trough's orientation starting to shift more towards the eastern United States. So, what does this imply? Are we anticipating a significant push of cold air farther to the east? I believe there's a strong possibility of that occurring, which could lead to increased chances for winter storms as we move several days in, roughly a week, give or take a day, into December for the eastern U.S. And this is a time frame I'm monitoring very closely. Well, to be precise, that's an area, not a time frame, Mitch, but you understand the point I'm making. Once we get about a week into December, we'll need to be watching closely. Now, the concerning aspect as we approach mid-December is this. This particular evolution is concerning because the pattern could quickly revert as it attempts to re-establish a flattened ridge across the southern tier of the nation. This would effectively anchor the coldest air to the north. However, this could be a very favorable pattern for locations farther north. But as we get closer to the Christmas holiday, the trough's orientation becomes more favorable. It successfully pushes back this ridge, and we see a pattern more indicative of a positive PNA and a negative EPO, with blocking over Alaska. Essentially, we see ridging over Alaska and the western U.S. So, consequently, cold air could funnel southward on the backside of this trough, potentially developing low-pressure systems. Okay, so we'll need to continue monitoring this. Folks, I believe the models are still working to resolve this pattern, hence the significant run-to-run variability. But ultimately, I'm moving beyond the discussion of the polar vortex and potential sudden stratospheric warming events for now. My primary focus is really on the MJO, folks. It truly is. And if we take a look at this first, I want to quickly examine this chart, since we do have a little more time. I've been moving through this forecast discussion quite smoothly, until, that ad blocker notification popped up again. But regardless, I want to review the operational European model's MJO progression one more time. Let's break this down for any new viewers. We're looking at phases 7, 6, 5, 4, and even phase 3. Phase 3 is conducive for cold, as is phase 7, so this range of the MJO, along with this one, are both favorable. But these are predominantly warm phases, okay? This means a warmer pattern is likely to dominate over a colder one across most of the lower 48. Phase 3 is favorable, and Phase 7 is as well. Phase 7 is about to become influential for parts of the country, but this is the current situation, is dominated by warmth, which naturally leads to the question, what are the favorable winter weather phases for introducing cold air? Well, Phase 8 is the prime driver, especially in December, while Phases 1 and 2 are also highly favorable. So, let's assess our current position and our projected trajectory. Today is the 20th, so we are situated in a complex pattern right here. Do you see this 8 to 10 configuration? That represents a period in November that is now behind us, roughly 10 days, or about a week or two ago, so it's barely discernible. But our current position is right in this zone, nearing what is known as the circle of death, or null phase. The critical question is, where do we go from here? This point represents the 23rd through the 25th of November, and then as we advance, we reach the 27th, which is also in November. That places us approximately 1 week out, showing a clear progression and amplification into Phase 7. This phase will permit cold air to spill into the country, but any southern extent will be fleeting, and it will remain primarily anchored in the northern and central United States. This is consistent with what we are observing with substantial Arctic air masses descending into the country. Regarding phases 6, 5, and 4, while we can get cold air, it is typically very transient. That cold air won't be anchored in place and will lack any significant longevity. In contrast, consider phases 8 and 1. If you look very closely, you can see the 1 and 3 markers right there, which correspond to December 1st and December 3rd. This indicates a progression directly through Phase 7 and toward the highly desirable Phase 8, which is the pattern we are looking for. Furthermore, if you examine the extended European model guidance here, it suggests we will eventually transition into Phase 8 as we approach the middle of the month. So, what data corroborates this forecast? Let's take a quick look at this MJO phase and temperature climatology chart. This covers November, December, and January, making it the perfect reference for this forecast period. Let me enlarge this for you. As you can see, which supports my earlier point, Phase 3 is predominantly associated with warmth. We see cooler conditions across the west. Phase 4 indicates warmth across the entire country. Phase 5 is similar, as is Phase 6. Then we arrive at Phase 7. At this point, we start to introduce some colder air, but it appears the southeast will still hold on to near average to above average temperatures. However, when you analyze Phase 7 in the context of our entire discussion about the upcoming pattern, it supports the forecast perfectly. Cold air will have significant difficulty penetrating into the south. It is forecast to remain firmly anchored across the northern tier of the nation. And if you followed our analysis between now and December, that is precisely the scenario being depicted. Subsequently, we transition into Phase 8. Do you see that phase down there? Notice all of that blue spreading across the lower 48? That is the ideal setup for fans of cold and winter weather. Okay, and if we also examine the precipitation outlook in this context, I hadn't planned on showing this, but while the signal is somewhat scattered, it does suggest an increase in precipitation across the deep south. So, that is certainly a trend worth monitoring closely. We can discuss the disruption of the polar vortex at length, and as we know, a sudden stratospheric warming event is critical. I've spoken on this before, and I believe it can interact with the proper MJO phase to create a high-impact pattern, establishing a high ceiling for cold potential in December. Ultimately, however, if we do not progress in Phase 8, we expect all that cold air to remain locked into the northern portion of the lower 48 states, which is great news for winter weather enthusiasts in the Northeast, potentially the Mid-Atlantic, and across the northern tier of the country. However, for those of you tuning in from the south hoping for winter weather, we really need to shift into Phase 8, otherwise we'll struggle against that persistent ridge of high pressure. Alright, enough about the long-range outlook. Let's focus on the weather for today. We're seeing a significant amount of much-needed moisture moving across the southern tier of the nation. It's arriving all at once, but we will certainly take it. Now, over in the western US, pardon me, my allergies are acting up from all this forecast excitement. We also have plenty of moisture moving across the west and some precipitation developing across the Great Lakes region as well. But overall, it's a decidedly more active weather pattern for the south-central US this morning compared to recent days. In fact, due to this active pattern, flood watches have been issued for parts of Texas. We also have some winter weather advisories in effect, along with widespread fog across the southern tier, which is being fueled by a surge of warm air. That warm air makes perfect sense as we're currently in Phase 6. Now, turning our attention to the Storm Prediction Center's outlook, there is a marginal risk of severe weather for portions of Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and New Mexico. Another day with a severe threat, much like yesterday. So, please remain vigilant. This system also brings a significant risk of flash flooding with it, particularly down here. We urge caution near Kerrville, Campwood, Rock Springs, Junction, and Bracketville. Apologies, trying to hold back a sneeze there. There's a 40% chance of excessive rainfall in that specific zone and a 15% chance in the surrounding yellow area, so be mindful of the potential for flash flooding. The same threat extends across Arkansas, southern Missouri, parts of Oklahoma and Kansas, and even into the western portions of Tennessee. All these regions face a risk of flash flooding. Now, shifting to the southeast, we're looking at quiet weather today, though we could certainly use the rain. Some of that much-needed rain could push into Tennessee and Kentucky this afternoon, eventually making its way into eastern Tennessee. We expect some shower activity to develop in the Tri-Cities region later on tonight, as well as in western and southwestern Virginia. However, most of the southeast will remain dry, though we're hoping to see some light rain across the Piedmont by morning. That includes areas of North Carolina and southern Virginia. Looking at the northeast, it's a quiet weather day today. There's not much to report, but by tomorrow morning, we could see some festive flurries in those classic snow-favored spots of northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and the Adirondacks. Now, back to the south-central U.S., where we are tracking a great deal of rain. We're seeing continuous waves of rainfall, with significant upper-level divergence supporting a very moist environment and promoting rising air. The result will be rounds of thunderstorms across Oklahoma and Texas, especially as we head into, say, 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. As you can see, nearly the entire state of Oklahoma will be dealing with rain, while a line of thunderstorms tracks through central Texas. This activity will persist into the evening hours. Mary, keep an eye on the sky, as a line of thunderstorms could reach you in northeast Texas later tonight. For those wondering, Mary is one of our loyal followers here on the channel. But yes, we're seeing continuous active feeds of moisture into that region. Meanwhile, in the north-central U.S., it's all about warm air and no snow. In fact, we could even see some rain showers develop later this evening across the UP. That's right, rain, and we'll see how far east that precipitation can extend, pushing into southern Illinois, Oklahoma, Missouri, and southern Nebraska by later tomorrow morning. In the western U.S., moisture continues to channel into the southwest. Later this evening, we're tracking a great deal of moisture across California, which will bring snow to the higher elevations, but folks, there's still not much cold air to work with. Regarding temperatures, speaking of cold versus warm air, the Northeast remains locked in a winter pattern, while the southern tier of the country stays warm, and we're seeing a temperature gradient in between those zones across the West. Here's what we're looking at. It is cooling down, but for the most part, it's still not cold enough for any significant snowfall in the lower elevations. So, let's make this our timestamp. This news will please some people in the Northeast, but it might upset you if you're not a fan of winter weather. But we're going to share a quick Bible devotion and then we will wrap this up. I'm going to say a couple of words about an event from yesterday, but first, from Psalm chapter 119, verse 50. In fact, I'm going to read verses 49 and 50. Remember your word to your servant, for you have given me hope through it. This is my comfort in my affliction. Your promise has given me life. So the message is that we should find hope in God's promise and comfort in His word during adversity. God's word is a powerful source of strength during difficult times. The promises of God within the word should grant us the strength to be resilient through challenging periods. And I truly believe God won't put you through anything that He won't see you out of. It may feel inescapable, folks, but He will guide you through it. Sometimes He lets you sit in that valley, which I'll mention because at times you are called to go through that valley. Other times you aren't. But through His guidance, His greater purpose in it all will be revealed if you trust Him. And sometimes, folks, that greater purpose is simply growth. I say this a lot. The growth is in the grind, right? That's why during suffering, we should find comfort because we know God has our back. And I'm going to leave it right there. This all goes back to, and listen, I'm speaking from my own experience. As always, I am speaking to myself here as well. And you know, it's so important to really talk to God when you're going through tough times. and that quiet time with him is absolutely huge. I can tell you, one of my favorite times to talk to God is during my 8-minute drive from my house to Planet Fitness, from about 4 to 10 to 4:20 in the morning. I mean, it just feels as though the world is quiet and my mind is completely free in the best way possible. It allows me to just talk to God. I feel like he's right there in the passenger seat beside me. But hey, folks, I want to mention this very quickly. If you haven't seen it, please check out the community post from yesterday evening. This AI situation is getting out of control, everyone. There's a channel out there that is not only stealing my content, but also taking it from Gerald from GM Weather, which is a great YouTube channel that's getting very popular in the weather community. And I suspect he's doing it to others too, though I haven't taken the time to investigate and compare everything. But essentially, what this individual is doing is taking all the information I just covered. He'll likely do the same with this very video. And he's using an AI voiceover of the exact words I am saying, with only a few minor edits made, with some slight distortion of the data, but the analysis confirms that an unknown entity is siphoning our forecast data through an artificial intelligence system, and the resulting atmospheric conditions are quite turbulent. The one mimic storm it generated, and there may be others we haven't tracked, is a significant event. It actually registered 3 times the energy readings of our original broadcast, which is truly remarkable and points back to that atmospheric algorithm I've discussed. I've briefed you all on this before. So, if I could ask for your assistance, if you have a moment, I know these atmospheric checks can get a little involved. It can be challenging at times. Please navigate to the source of that disturbance. Its coordinates are in our community bulletin, and I may post a direct link in the data stream below. Please report the signal for broadcast impersonation. The system will then ask which broadcast is being impersonated, at which point you should navigate to our main station homepage on YouTube, copy the link, and input our primary signal frequency there. This is because the interference is occurring directly within our broadcast sector. You can use this same procedure for Gerald's station or any other, but we must mount a coordinated response. We anticipate a persistent weather battle ahead. I believe this is a climate pattern we'll be forecasting for the foreseeable future. Now, artificial intelligence has its benefits in certain models, but it also presents these conditions. So, my personal outlook remains calm because I'm confident a powerful high-pressure system is watching over our station. We're a community under one sky here. That's the full report for now. I have to get back to the weather desk. I wish you all a wonderful day, and we'll issue a new forecast tomorrow morning. God bless.